For those of you who don't know me, I've been with you guys during this night enough times where I actually kind of recognize faces, which is really neat. I'm grateful to be back with you. My time in Allen is always really, really interesting. I don't know if you know this because, you obviously go to school here. Not every district can pull this off. I do a lot of these in a lot of school districts, and there are nights where we'll have a district-wide parent night with less than 10 parents. Allen, you guys support your district, you support your kids, you support their schools in a way that very few districts do. So I'm always pleased to be in Allen. Our topic tonight is different. If you've been here with me in the past, my topic is usually technology, and we're going to do that later in the year. But my research focus area, I'm a family therapist, and I want to get into that in just a second. But my research focus area was on the interplay of digital technology and family life. Okay, so you're going to hear some of that in the course of our conversation today. But our topic is different. I'm excited about our topic because this is something I'm passionate about. I'm going to try to help you tonight raise kids who communicate more effectively and healthier. I'm gonna try as best I can to help you raise kids who can communicate with you about what's going on in their life, what's going on in their day, and most importantly, when they struggle, some things that you can help do to bring them back down again. I want to point something out though before we take our little journey. What I want to point out to you is most of what you're going to hear is not crisis management. Okay, and the reason for that, the best time to intervene in your kid's life is before there's a crisis. If you're waiting until things explode to respond to your kid is going to be missing an awful lot of tools, and you are going to feel like you're going crazy. So my goal tonight is to get you past that. All right, I want to start with a conversation, though. It's one that we could probably spend a solid 2 or 3 hours discussing / complaining about. But I just want to hear from a couple of you as to how you respond to the question in front of you. The question is, how would you describe the quality of speech in the world that we currently live in? Limited? That might be the nicest way I've heard that described. Limited. It is limited. Would you care to expound? Any thoughts on limited? Why do you say limited?
Well, because we have very few words that we use over and over.
Our vocabulary is brief. For fun, every now and then, I like to read, in therapy sessions, I like to read letters, like Civil War era letters that people would write home. Oh, it's poetry. It's, my dearest love, I long for you in the cold winter's nights. And then I'll read a text that I sent my wife, and it's like pizza, ? That's it. We don't so much communicate as we just kind of grunt at each other like cavemen now, don't we? Okay, good, limited. How else would you describe the quality of speech in the world that we live in? Yeah? Blunt. I want that to not be true. We don't bother with the build-up. We just go right for the jugular. Okay, so the word was blunt. I'm going to do my best to not take the bait because you just set me up for a long conversation about social media. I'm not going to do that. I am going to say there's a reason for that. In fact, I am going to talk about social media in a minute. Blunt. We are more blunt than we used to be. In our families, our conversation can't be blunt all the time. But it sounds that way in the rest of the world. Good. What else? How would you describe the quality of speech in the world that you live in? Fragmented. Oh, keep talking. That's enough. Moving on. I'm kidding. See? Keep going.
Because certain words exist within certain generations and they don't translate very well across that generational gap.
Multi-generational language. Is that why you say fragmented? Okay. So I used to teach high school. It felt like it was only a few years ago. It wasn't until I realized that kids are using the word skibbity that I realized I haven't been near high school kids in a long time. I don't speak that language anymore. I don't get it. I am now, and it was hard. I appreciate you all being here to help me through my grieving process of realizing I'm old. But yes, that multi-generational language does evolve and change, and it does create some divides where maybe they don't have to be. Any other thoughts?
Right now, what I'm saying is
Communicate only when we need or want.
Yeah, for the third point.
So, all right, I want to. Well,
She said limited, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it will be what
You're saying limited because we only communicate when we need something or want something. Okay, so for those of you who know me, which again is a lot of you, I have a hard time not just spending the next 45 minutes talking about phones now. All right, but I'm not going to do that. Here's what I am going to say. The comment was, the speech is limited because we only communicate when we need something. If I had to identify the top 2 or 3 problems that families as a whole face right now, that might be number 1. Okay, so communication has kind of devolved to a place where it's only essential, necessary information when it's essential and necessary for me. The problem with that is, if you only talk to your spouse, you only talk to your kids, you only talk to your parents when you need something, you're treating them like employees. They are butlers, they're a butler service, and there's no relationship. We tend to want to give to our families and communicate with our families out of kind of the overflow of the relationship that we've built. And if we don't build a relationship, there's no overflow. Okay, good. Any other thoughts? Give me one more. I kind of thought we'd get there quicker. She said toxic. Yes, I have no comments. You are 100% correct. All right, so how did we get here? Okay, I'm going to give you just a real short version. Well, actually, I forgot to have another question. Before we get to how we got there, you just described a bunch of words. The words you just used are the world that these kids are growing up in. They're growing up with that as the norm. They're growing up with fragmented, toxic, needs-based communication. Okay, what do you think what impact do you think that has on them? How?
Because they're not, they don't have the right tools to be able to communicate in a way that is beneficial to the receiver.
Okay, they don't have the right tools to communicate in a way that's beneficial to the receiver. I'm going to reference a study that you may have heard probably 20 years ago. There was a study that was published in a major academic journal, and the study was about kids from certain environments versus kids from other environments and how many words they had been exposed to. Okay, and the study found that kids from different environments who had been exposed to more words had a higher IQ. Okay, that study could never be replicated. Okay, what I mean by that is we tried repeatedly to demonstrate that that was a valid study. Turns out it was an invalid study. That wasn't why kids had a higher IQ. It wasn't because they heard more words. Kids had a higher IQ because there were more conversational exchanges in their home. What does that mean? You want smarter kids? You have to talk to them. That raises their intelligence. It raises their ability to do exactly what you just described, to have the tools required for back and forth conversation. It is shocking to me how often we talk at our kids, not with our kids, and then expect our kids to naturally know how to communicate with us. All right, any other thoughts as to how this might impact our kids?
If the lines of communication are not open amongst family members, and then when the kids grow up, or they get to that young teenagers, and we wonder why they're not communicating, we have to model that. So having those lines of communication open.
So lines of communication open when they're young, because when they get to be teenagers, we get confused. All right, so I got a bunch of parents of young kids. Please hear what I'm about to say, not as an indictment. Please hear it as inspiration. We have a lot of parents who run from conversations with their little kids who then don't understand why their 15-year-old won't talk to them. Their little kids badger them. Oh, he won't stop asking me questions. Oh, please hang on to that. Engage as often as you can with those questions. Communicate as often as you can with a kid who wants to communicate with you, because they will be 15. They will be 16. And when they get to that age, you want that conversation line to still be open. If you spend 10 years of their childhood trying to shut down their dialogue, don't be shocked when you have to spend the next 6 trying to open it back up again. All right, so I'm hopeful that you heard what I just said. I am mindful. For those of you who think his world may be different, I have a 9-year-old who has not stopped talking since the day he was born. I'll go in to check on him in the middle of the night, so he'll be kind of awake, and I'll walk in and I'll just like pat him on the head, and he will look up at me and go, "Spider-Man's powers were better than Iron Man's." All right, that's awesome. Glad to hear it. And I'll come back in a few minutes later and he'll say, "Daddy, should I get a haircut?" He asked me that question half asleep. Should I get a haircut? He then asked me, what time should I wake up tomorrow? And I was like, you're 9 and you're homeschooled. You don't have any reason to get up tomorrow. But he won't stop asking me questions. One of the things about him that I find unique is he is not shockingly, he is me as a kid. I had parents who indulged that dialogue. I want you to do the same with yours. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how we got here. I don't want to spend, I have one slide on this. I don't want to spend a ton of conversation on how we got here, because again, those of you who know me know my goal is to help give you tools. I'm trying to give you good stuff. I don't want to just emphasize the weight of how we got here, but I do want to mention, here's how we got here. Speech went from hard to get to impossible to avoid, and it took some steps to get there. When speech was hard to get, you know what we did as a society, as a culture? It had depth. It had dialogue. There was back and forth. There was color to our speech. We took pride in the ability to explain long-form dialogue. You go back even to ancient civilizations. Long-form dialogue, poems, stories handed down over generations in cultures are how we transmitted society and how we transmitted values and norms. Information was hard to get, so it was valuable. Now, you cannot get away from it. At some point today, you have been exposed to some sort of political message, whether you want to or not. You cannot get away from it. That is the world that you live in. That is the world that your kids are growing up in. Now, here's the problem. When information is hard to get, it's valuable. And we treat it that way. What do we do when it's everywhere? We shrug our shoulders. So how do I get your attention? If I need your attention, if my job depends on your attention, how can I get it? Be obnoxious, be controversial, and say crazy things as loud as I can. In the world we're in now, you're going to pay attention to me. Now, it might be to video me, to send to people who think that this is crazy, but at least I'm getting your attention. It's one of the reasons why I have struggled. I do these presentations all over the place. I don't have a social media presence. I get asked that question a lot. Can I follow you somewhere? No, I don't post social media content. And the reason I don't is I am aware, based on the years of research I've done, the way to grow that following, I'm fearful that I would have to get extreme, and I don't want to do that. And so dialogue needs to be, I can't give you a 2-minute video on parenting. I need to have an extended conversation with you. All right, so when we go from information being hard to get to impossible to avoid, we have this weird tendency to devalue it in the process. So today, I'm going to try, it is 6:30. I have 25 minutes to inspire you and your family to communicate more effectively, to walk out of here liking each other more than you did when you walked in the door. Now, like every good magazine article / social media post, it had to have a number. So 10 things that you can do today that will benefit your family and improve their ability to communicate with you. Number 1, this one's pretty simple, but I'm always shocked at how few people do it. Actually talk about how you talk. Okay? Define what you want. I'm going to put what I mean. I want you to have a series of conversations with the adults, the teenagers if you've got them, the older elementary kids if you've got them. I want to have an open dialogue about what speech should sound like in your home. This is not an abstract thought. I legitimately want you to ask each other, hey, why does it matter how we speak to each other? Question for those of you in the room who are involved in romantic relationships. Have you ever had a fight about somebody's tone? I'm guessing me and my wife, not the only two people who've ever fought about an innocent statement. Like, why'd you say it like that? I know how to get the food out of the pantry. You don't have to bark it at me. Tone matters. Why does it matter? Well, because it conveys a message. It conveys an attitude. It can convey that I'm frustrated with you or I'm not frustrated with you. These questions are really vital. Now, here's something for your kids. A lot of our parenting, we think, is autopilot parenting. Okay, I'm going to tell you what I mean. Do you want your kid to speak kindly to other people? Do you want your kid to use manners when they're around other people they need to be considerate of? Do you want your kid to see a kid who is struggling and offer to help? Do you want your kid to identify kids who need a friend and try to be a friend? They're not going to do that without an adult who's helping them see opportunities to do that. Your job as parents on the earliest stages of their life is to try to point them to the behavior you're looking for. Okay, so when I ask you to have this conversation, I don't mean in an abstract way. I mean, these are conversations for you to have starting today. If you haven't taken a picture of this, I'm going to send these slides to whoever put them together, or who put the presentation together. I put the presentation together. I'm going to send these slides. You'll be able to get them. We'll email them out. But these are actual conversations. There's one on here that's pretty important. So I talk to my boys. I've got 2 sons. My oldest will be 13 in December. He went from being like 6 to being 18 overnight. It was super. Grew like 6 inches. Smells terrible. That all happened really quickly. My 9-year-old just turned 9 a couple of weeks ago, so I'm right in the mix with you guys. I'm doing the same things that you're doing. There's a question on here that came out of one of our conversations. We have this dialogue in our home. How do I want you to talk to people? How do I want you to treat people when I'm not around? There was a moment years ago where I said something to my kids in a stern voice, dad voice. We've all got a dad voice, right? I said something in dad voice. And my oldest was like, I don't like it when you yell. And I'm like, dude, you don't know what yelling is. You did not grow up in my house. So I realized at that moment, okay, we need to have a conversation about more than just how we speak kindly. We needed to have a conversation about those moments where you might hear blunt or heavy dialogue. Okay, my oldest is in 7th grade. He is playing middle school football. We homeschooled him when he was really little, but now he's in school. He's in middle school football. We had to have a conversation about middle school football. And I was a coach. I was a college athlete. I know sports. I had to talk to him about there will be times where instructions on a football field are more yelled at you than they are spoken to you. Now, I don't love that. I don't know why we do that. We don't have to do that. But it was something he needed to hear. So there's going to be moments in your family life where speech might be a little more harsh than it would be in other times. Your kids need to know what those circumstances are and need to know that there are times where it may happen. All right. The last question that I put up here. What are the times that you've enjoyed each other the most and why? I want to tell you why that question's up here. If I had the time to go around the room and ask you, when were the moments you enjoyed your family the most? You know what I'm going to guess? I'm going to guess they were moments where you were talking together, all kind of engaged with each other. You were maybe laughing with each other, or you were sharing an experience that you then talked about. Okay, I want you to have this conversation with your family. When do we enjoy being together? And the reason I want you to do that is if you are at home and you know that your family enjoys watching movies together, and it's a Friday night and you're not doing anything, you've had some dialogue about doing things together that you enjoy, maybe you get to pick something that brings your family together as opposed to pull your family apart. I need you to hear this because I think it will help you with every relationship in your life, not just your kids. I do not believe there is any such thing as a neutral conversation with people you care about. Okay, what I mean is, we don't know each other super well, but every interaction we're going to have tonight, when we're done, if you talk to me personally, that conversation will either make you like me a little bit more or make you like me a little bit less. I don't think there's any neutral. I just don't think that people work that way. And when it comes to relationships and your kids, I need you to think to yourself, this conversation is going to allow us to move a little closer to each other or a little farther away. All right, so we're priming children for positive and healthy behavior. Number 2, all right, so we've now talked about what healthy dialogue can look like. Number 2, we then want to express really clearly what it should be. All right, so here's what I mean by this. For those of you who can't see, I want you to start thinking in terms of coaching empathy. Empathy is the most valuable tool your children have at their disposal. However, neurobiologically, they don't get it. They're not good at it. Between the ages of 0 and 12, their prefrontal cortex is going through, it's a massive overhaul prior to age 5, and then there's another big one from 12 till about 25. But that prefrontal cortex is not fully formed, and that's where upper level cognitive thinking is. What I mean by that is, in the front of their brain, the part that's developing, that's where they're going to develop a moral compass. That's where they're going to develop empathy. When they're little, you have to give it to them. Okay, you can't, to be the kind of parent you're wanting to be, the goal is not to let a 5-year-old discover what they think is an appropriate bound in communication. You have to coach that. And coaching empathy means You can't talk to people that way, and here's why. Once you've done that, we then move on to the coaching part. Here is another way to do it. Okay, you have to be really involved in those moments. Let me tell you where we get ourselves in trouble. As parents, we're really good at punishing what we don't like. We can jump on that. I know what I don't like, and that gets one of the multitude of punishments at my disposal. You know what we never do? We never emphasize what they like. Let me give you a little secret. I coached basketball for a long time. If I had a kid who didn't know how to shoot free throws, you know what I never did? I never made him do push-ups. That would make no sense. I didn't punish a kid for not knowing how to do what it was that it was my job to teach him how to do. So if a kid didn't know how to shoot free throws, what did we do? We stayed after practice. You know what we did? Shot a lot of free throws. Okay, when your kids make mistakes, when they communicate in a way that's unhealthy, I need you as parents, there's always going to be consequences to actions. I understand that. We'll get to that in a minute. There's consequences to mistakes, but I need you to spend more time coaching than you do condemning. Okay, that is a massive, massive mistake in the parenting world. We condemn and then we tell them not to do it again. Don't do that again is not a good goal. Don't do that again will not be effective. What do you want? Not what do you not want. All right, so we've talked about coaching empathy. We want to do it as often as possible. We want to revise as needed. And then, parents, I'm going to ask you to do something. I'm going to give you a piece of information that might save you in a moment. If your kid violates a rule that you've been telling them for years, it does not mean you're a bad parent. It doesn't mean they're not getting it. It doesn't mean your kid is dense. It doesn't mean your kid's a sociopath. It doesn't mean you have a bad child. You know what it means? It means you have a kid. Kids make mistakes, not because they are defiant, but because they are children. Now, your kid may have some defiant issues, and if that's the case, there are measures that we can take. But I don't need you to assume that errors in behavior are necessarily a sign of deviance. They could just be the sign of a developing brain who needs a lot of coaching on empathy. All right, so we're going to coach empathy. We're also going to do, and this is my favorite phrase when it comes to parenting young kids, connect before you correct. Connect before you correct. You want to correct the behavior of a child? Step one, connect to that child. Now, there is one really important caveat to that. If your child is engaged in something dangerous, just stop the behavior. Okay, don't worry about connecting first. I don't want you to say, now, sweetie, that knife looks sharp. Can you put it down? No. At that moment, I need you to take the knife out of the kid's hand. Okay, we're gonna correct that behavior quickly. But if your kid's not in danger, if your kid is not endangering someone else, if your kid is not endangering him or herself, your job is to connect with the kid first, and then there's a lot of room to talk about connecting or correcting behavior. All right, still rolling. Model. So if you've been with my tech presentations, this slide is not surprising. Hey, heads up, parenting's hard. I don't know if I just burst anybody's bubble. I don't know if you walked in thinking like, what's the switch I can flip with my kids? There's not. This is a hard thing we've been tasked with doing. All right, so once we've defined what we want, once we've then said out loud what we want, before my kids are accountable for this behavior, you know who's accountable for it first? I got to model what I want. Folks, you can't get angry at what you model. You want your 16-year-old off their phone? Stay off your phone. You want your 16-year-old to not bring TikTok to the table? Don't bring Facebook to the table. Okay, that's a great place to start. Next, don't give yourself an excuse for crossing a line you would not allow your child to cross. I'm going to give you an example of what I mean. A lot of families will say it is unacceptable for kids to yell in our house. We are not going to be a family that yells. But if you make me mad enough, I can yell. Your kid doesn't understand that. You look like a hypocrite. They're not going to trust you, and they're not going to follow that rule. Okay, the goal has to be we set boundaries, and you as the parents model an adherence to those boundaries. You cannot ask for healthy kids if your pantry is full of donuts. You cannot ask for kids to make good, healthy choices that you are unwilling to make as a parent. Okay, now, you're going to punish kids when they do wrong. I'm okay with that. That's necessary. You're going to do things with corrective interventions with kids. But if there is a line that you don't want your kid to cross, the best way you can begin is by making sure that you don't cross it, because I need you to remember that you are their first and most important teacher. They're going to learn more from you than in anybody else the rest of their life. Here's some heavy weight. For those of you who haven't felt the weight of parenting yet, Every choice they make in their future relationships will be in relation to the choices that you make. Let me tell you what I mean. They will accept the behaviors that you give them that they like. They will reject the behaviors you give them that they don't like. But no matter what, their future is based on you. Their future is based on the decisions that we make. Why does that matter? It matters because it is our job to be very cautious and mindful. Parents, I got a bunch of you right now with little tiny kids who are pulling at you and they're tugging at you and they're running around and you're grabbing them. I've been there. I love you. You're never going to bother me in a presentation with little kids, but I need you to hear me. This window is really small. They're going to get big before you know it, and you're going to miss these moments where they're squishy and tiny and sweet. And so I say that because in the idea, you've all heard it, the idea that the days are long, but the years are short. For those of you who have aging kids who are beyond those little kid stages, oh, that's really true. All right. I didn't mean to depress you. I have a way of doing that. All right. Let's move on to the next one. We're going to ask deeper questions. Woo, I got to get moving. Ask deeper questions. Here are some good, deeper questions. I'm going to kind of step out of the way so you can see it. Here's some good, deeper questions for you to ask yourself. When you are talking to your kid, let me tell you what you are probably going to be prone to doing. We ask our kid questions as though they are an employee in our factory. How was your workday? Were you productive? Were there problems on the assembly line I should know about? No? Off to your room. We talk to kids like they're on our payroll. We don't tend to get to know their world. If you want kids who can communicate more effectively, one of the best ways to do that, you want kids who can ask empathic questions to other kids. You know where they're going to get that from? They're going to get that from you. They're going to get that from whether or not you are able to sit with them and ask about their world, ask about their life. When my son asked me whether or not he needs a haircut the next day, my response was, no, I think your hair's great, but if you want a haircut, we can talk about it tomorrow. We're going to have dialogue in those moments. Your job is to connect. Here's some good, simple phrases you can learn. What was that like for you? You know what we do as parents? I listen to every story from my kids. You know what I got locked and loaded? Dad wisdom. I'm waiting to put it in there. Tommy, hold on, where's the opening? You know what I would have done. It's always something. It's always some kind of nugget. I got this gold. I got a bank account full of wisdom, and I got to hand it out, right? As kids, they don't want to hear your guidance and wisdom until you've heard their stories. They want to hear about. They want you to be surprised when they say to you, "Did you know that?" Your response is no. One of these days, my kids are going to realize either Dad was lying or he was really dumb. Because most of the things I said to him, he acted shocked. And the reason for that is because kids like to tell us stories. They like to give us news and information we don't know about. My 12-year-old has introduced me to half a dozen bands that I grew up listening to. But it's always, oh, that's really interesting. I think I've heard them before. Tell me what you think. Giving them that ability connects them to you. It bonds them to you, and it builds a relationship that's going to allow you to change and evolve with them. All right. What was that like for you? Then what happened? How did you react? If they tell you about a problem they had at school, well, then she said this to me. Fight the urge to say, you know what you need to say? Because that's what you're thinking, I got this problem fixed. I know that girl. You know what? I know her mom. I know where she got it from. So here's what you do. You bring up her mom's issues. Now, I'm kidding. We don't hopefully do that. But the reality is we listen to kids' stories looking to interject our wisdom. I want you to listen to stories and try to pull as much information out of them as you can. Here's why. Empathy comes from a deep knowledge of self. It doesn't come from a deep academic knowledge of dialogue. You want your kid to ask about another kid's world, your kid needs to be able to articulate his or her own world. All right. So let's keep moving because I'm almost out of time and I don't want to shortchange the end of it. I want you to plan for difficult emotions. Let me ask you a question that is a rhetorical question, which means you don't have to answer it out loud. Question that bothers me the most because it is so essential and so few parents have an answer. Does your kid know what they're supposed to do when they get angry that won't get them in trouble? Does your kid have an answer to that question? They should. But most of them don't. You know what they know? They know what they're not allowed to do. They know they can't slam doors. They know they can't yell in your face. They know they can't kick things. So what can they do? Okay, that is up to you and your family to determine. But let me promise you something. If this is a spoiler alert for you as a parent, I apologize. I'm going to Shyamalan the end of this thing. I'm really sorry, but your kids are going to have rough days. They're going to be angry at times. Sometimes they might be angry with you because, of course, they misunderstood you. You were fine. You did nothing wrong, but they misunderstood you. There are going to be moments where they're angry with you. Do you know what I want your kid to be able to do, though? Express their anger in a way that won't get them in trouble. Let me ask you a question. What do you do when you're angry that doesn't get you in trouble? I hope you have an answer. I hope the answer is I go run, I work out, I breathe, I meditate, I do something. I hope you have an answer to that question. Your kid needs an answer to that question as well. All right, so we're going to plan for difficult emotions. I also want to make sure we've asked the question of all the behaviors we have accessible to us, which ones are absolutely no-fly zones? So in other words, is it acceptable in your house for a kid to ever scream at the top of their lungs? If the answer is no, then that needs to be a non-negotiable. That's not one of those things that you can do. Is it acceptable for your kid to, I don't know, fill in the blank? The goal is you need to have a tool of places that your kid can go in order to get aggression or to get anger out, and then a tool of, or a box of things they can't go to. I'm going to give you a really short little story. I used to run a clinic in a public school district, which is why I speak to school districts all the time. I ran a clinic for alternative ed elementary placement kids. Okay, so I ran a clinic where I worked with families of the kids who were in elementary school who had alternative placements. You know, one of the most effective strategies we ever implemented in the classroom? We actually had a little station set up near the recycle bin. And when kids in kindergarten, first and second grade would get really angry, we let them go to the recycle bin and try to tear up the paper in as small pieces as they could. It focused their energy. It focused their aggression. It was tactile. It felt kind of nice to rip up that piece of paper. And within about 5 minutes at the max, usually between about a minute or 5 minutes, the behaviors came down. The breathing slowed. There was a strategy for what to do with this kid that wouldn't get them in trouble. All right, a couple more before we get out of here. Next, we are going to role play different scenarios. What does that mean? It means exactly what it sounds like. If your kid is struggling over and over again with a situation that you are struggling to get a handle on, I'm going to catch you up here. We've already talked about how we want the dialogue to sound. We've been modeling the dialogue. We've been going through that. We've been giving them strategies for how they should handle difficult emotions. Next, your kid's having a hard time in an environment at home, role play that environment. Here, you play the role of the other kid. You play the role of the teacher. You play the role of the coach, and you give your kid a chance to talk to you. I mentioned a minute ago, my oldest is 12. He'll be 13 in December. You might think to yourself, that's too old to role play. We role played on our way to school like 3 weeks ago. Why? Because I told you, he was homeschooled for a bunch of years when he was little. So he missed a window of like interacting with peers that is really valuable. It's one of the reasons why he's in school. We had a conversation on the way to school a couple of mornings ago where he was expressing some frustration with a back and forth that he'd had with a group of his friends he's known for a really long time. And I was able to role play it with him to give him some tools for like, how do you connect with kids who maybe are into something different than you are? Okay, role play is essential. They will learn through this in ways they will not learn through you giving them information. All right, the next one is super weird. It almost doesn't fit, but it is maybe my most strenuous request of you. Read fiction to your kids. If they are too old for you to read with them, that means they're 40, first of all. But if you have read fiction to and with your kids, let your kids read it themselves. This sounds like a weird plug for the library program, right? It's not. There is actual scientific data linked to the idea that fiction raises empathy in children. Why? What is fiction? Fiction is someone else's story, told through their eyes, told through their life experience. It's their history. It's their story. Your child, in the midst of a book of fiction, is entering into the life of another human being, is entering into another existence, another plane, and having to look at the world through someone else's eyes. There are few things you can do for a kid to train empathy more than taking them on fantastical novel adventures. My kid's librarian, from the time we were really little, we made really good friends. Our oldest, it's a weird story. I'm giving you fragments of it. Our oldest went to kindergarten. We connected with the librarian. I still text her, hey, my 8-year-old's done with a book. He really liked it. Can you recommend a book that's more comedy than anything else? She'll send me back a bunch of lists. Okay, so the idea here is fiction does actually raise the empathy in children. All right, I'm going to try not to expound on these last 3 because I'm just going to give them to you fairly quickly. You want to raise kids who communicate more effectively? You can't expect them to do that in a world that they're not contributing to. All right, so here's my challenge to you as a parent. You want to raise kids whose empathy stretches beyond your home, then take them beyond your home to grow their empathy. Every week, I don't know what it's going to look like for you. Every week, you know what I'm begging you to do? Have something on your schedule that benefits someone else. Every week, have some activity that makes someone else's life or day easier. I'll give you a real easy example. Okay, by the way, I'm not going to like volunteer at a mission for 8 hours on a Saturday every weekend. That's great if you can do it. Most families can't do that. We have a neighbor who lives a couple doors down from us. She's in her 90s, and the best thing we could come up with was a couple times a week, our boys go and get her mail, get her newspaper, and they bring it into her house, and she always gives them some way past its expiration date candy that they bring back to us. Okay, it's something where we're trying to give them the experience of giving to others. So if you want kids who communicate with empathy, show them empathy. Practice gratitude in your home. What are you thankful for? Why are you thankful for it? Practice gratitude in your home. Communicate it as often as possible. Can I tell you something that me and my family struggle with because we're normal, and I think you probably do too? You want to know what I'm mad about? Buckle up. I got lots to say. You want to know what I'm grateful for? Oh, I don't know. No. That's not the way I want us to communicate. I want to be a family that leads with gratitude. We complain on the back end, but we lead with gratitude. And finally, I'm actually going to get this done. We're going to talk about non-business topics. All right, I'm a marriage counselor. I'm a marriage and family therapist. Let me tell you the most irritating thing that a marriage counselor hears. I hear we're just like coworkers now. Okay? What do you guys talk about? You know, budgets, weekly schedules. So coworker stuff? Shocking that you would one day wake up and find that you're coworkers. Okay, here's why that matters to me. Without intentionality, your family will turn into a series of conversations about your week and about your budget and about your calendar. Okay, I need you to get beyond that. I'm going to give you some tools. There's something on Amazon that you can buy. They're about 20 bucks each. They're called table topic conversation cards. They just come in a little plastic case. There's like 100 of them. You can put them on your dinner table. We have 3 of them sitting on our dinner table. And at dinner, the kids will pull out a card, read it, and we all have to answer it. We've got these in our glove box in our car. I don't know if you've guessed this about me, but I could talk to a wall, have a pretty good conversation, and probably learn a few things. Like that's the level of dialogue that I can engage in naturally. We have conversation cards because without them, I will talk about the same things over and over and over. You don't have to be creative. You just got to be smart. All right, so let's finish this thing out the right way. Define what you're looking for. Express what you're looking for. Model what you're looking for. So these are about you. Next, we're going to move to conversation, ask deeper questions, plan for difficult emotions, role play difficult scenarios. Then we're going to start reading fiction to our kids. We're going to do good in the world. We're going to practice gratitude, and we're going to talk more. Folks, I am here tonight to tell you how to raise kids who communicate more effectively. You notice what I didn't do? I didn't give you any strategies to say, tell your kid to do this. You know why? I'm going to promise you something, and you can hold me to this. You do 7 of these by Christmas, your kid is going to be speaking to you in an empathy level they've never experienced before. I promise you, with the behaviors you see in front of you, even if you can't do all of them, you do a handful of these, your child will know themselves better than they do now. They will know you and your expectations better than they know now, and they will know how to make the world a better place more than they know now. That is a child who can speak with empathy. All right, thank you guys for being here. I will see you in a couple of months.